My name is Diana. I'm 28 years old, and 3 months ago, my world turned completely upside down. I thought I knew my family. I thought I understood what loyalty meant, what blood meant, what unconditional love looked like. But when my grandmother passed away and left me her entire fortune, I discovered just how wrong I was about everything. Let me start from the beginning, because this story, well, it's going to shock you just as much as it shocked me. I was always Grandma Rose's favorite, not because I was the prettiest or the smartest ever grandchildren, but because I was the only one who genuinely spent time with her. While my cousins were busy with their social media lives and my siblings were climbing their career ladders, I was the one sitting in her tiny kitchen every Sunday, listening to her stories about the old country, learning her secret recipes, and helping her tend to her beloved rose garden. Grandma Rose came to America with nothing but the clothes on her back and a heart full of dreams. She worked 3 jobs to put my grandfather through college, raised 4 children in a 2-bedroom apartment, and somehow managed to save every penny she could. She was the kind of woman who washed aluminum foil to reuse it, who grew her own vegetables even in the tiniest urban plot, who believed that hard work and determination could overcome any obstacle. I loved her fiercely, and I thought she loved me the same way, but I never imagined that love would come with such a price. The call came on a Tuesday morning. I was rushing to catch the subway to my job at the marketing firm when my phone rang. It was Mr. Henderson, Grandma Rosa's lawyer. His voice was gentle but professional as he delivered the news that would change everything. Diana, I'm sorry to inform you that your grandmother passed away peacefully in her sleep last night. My world stopped. The bustling subway station around me faded into white noise. Grandma Rose, my anchor, my confidant, my Sunday morning ritual, was gone. I don't remember much about the next few hours, just the blur of calling in sick to work, the endless phone calls to family members, and the hollow feeling in my chest that felt like someone had carved out a piece of my soul. The funeral was beautiful. Grandma Rose would have loved seeing how many people came to pay their respects. The little church was packed with neighbors, old friends, and extended family members I hadn't seen in years. My Aunt Margaret gave a lovely eulogy about how Grandma Rose had been the backbone of our family. My Uncle David shared funny stories about her legendary stubbornness. My cousins posted touching Instagram stories with vintage photos. Everyone was grieving, everyone was sharing memories, and for a moment I felt that familiar warmth of family solidarity. We were all united in our loss, all connected by our shared love for this incredible woman who had shaped so many of our lives. But that feeling didn't last long. 3 days after the funeral, Mr. Henderson called again. This time, his voice carried a different tone, something that sounded almost apologetic. Diana, I need you to come to my office. There are some matters regarding your grandmother's estate that we need to discuss. I assumed it was routine paperwork. Maybe Grandma Rose had left me some small keepsake, a piece of jewelry, or one of her handwritten recipe cards. I'd already decided I wanted to ask the family if I could have her rose garden tools. They were old and worn, but they carried so many memories of our Sunday mornings together. Mr. Henderson's office was exactly what you'd expect from a small-town lawyer who'd been practicing for 40 years. Dark wood paneling, leather-bound books, and the faint smell of old paper and coffee. He gestured for me to sit in the chair across from his massive oak desk, and I noticed he had a thick manila folder with my grandmother's name written on it. Diana, he began, adjusting his glasses, your grandmother was a very private woman when it came to her financial affairs. Even I was surprised by some of what we discovered after her passing. I nodded, not really understanding where this was going. She left a will, and it's very specific. There are some small bequests to various charities and a few personal items designated for different family members, but the bulk of her estate, he paused, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. The bulk of her estate she left entirely to you. I'm sorry, what? I blinked, certain I'd misheard him. Your grandmother's entire estate. Her house, her savings, her investments, her life insurance policy, everything. It's all yours. But that's impossible. How much are we talking? Mr. Henderson opened the folder and pulled out a document. Diana, your grandmother's estate is worth approximately $2.4 million. I'm pretty sure I stopped breathing for a full minute. $2.4 million. The number didn't even seem real. It was like he just told me I'd won the lottery. Except this wasn't a game show. This was my grandmother's life savings, accumulated through decades of careful planning and incredible sacrifice. She never told me, I whispered. She was very explicit about that in our conversations. Rose said she didn't want money to change how her family treated her, or how they treated each other. She wanted to be loved for who she was, not what she had. But why me? Why not divide it among all the grandchildren, or give it to my dad and his siblings? Mr. Henderson smiled, and for the first time since I'd entered his office, he looked genuinely warm. She left a letter for you. She wanted me to give it to you when I explained the inheritance. He handed me an envelope with my name written in Grandma Rose's familiar handwriting. My hands were shaking as I opened it. My dearest Diana, if you're reading this, then I'm no longer with you, and I hope you know how much joy you brought to my final years. You were the only one who saw me as more than just an old woman with stories to tell. You listened to my dreams, you shared my Sunday mornings, and you loved me without expecting anything in return. I know this inheritance will come as a shock, not just to you, but to the rest of the family. I've thought about this decision for years, and I want you to understand why I made it. This money represents every sacrifice I made, every extra shift I worked, every luxury I denied myself so that I could build something lasting for the people I love. I'm not leaving it to you because you need it more than the others. I'm leaving it to you because I trust you to understand what it truly represents. This isn't just money, Diana. This is my legacy, my life's work, my final gift to the person who showed me that love doesn't require a reason or a reward. Use it wisely. Use it kindly. And remember that the most valuable inheritance I can give you isn't money at all. It's the knowledge that you are deeply, truly loved. All my love, Grandma Rose. By the time I finished reading, tears were streaming down my face. Mr. Henderson quietly handed me a box of tissues and waited while I composed myself. What happens now? I asked. Now we begin the process of transferring the assets to your name. It will take a few weeks to finalize everything. But Diana, you need to understand something important. Your grandmother's estate goes through probate court, which means it becomes public record. Your family will find out, and soon. I nodded, but I don't think the full weight of his warning hit me in that moment. I was still reeling from the shock, still trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened. $2.4 million. It was more money than I'd ever dreamed of having. More than enough to pay off my student loans, buy a house, maybe even start my own business. But as I walked out of Mr. Henderson's office that day, clutching Grandma Rose's letter in my hand, I had no idea that this unexpected windfall was about to reveal the true nature of everyone I thought I could trust. The first person I told was my sister Emma. We'd always been close, just 18 months apart in age, and I needed to share this overwhelming news with someone who knew how much Grandma Rose meant to me. I met Emma at our favorite coffee shop, a little place downtown where we'd been meeting for sister talks since college. She was already there when I arrived, scrolling through her phone and sipping a vanilla latte. Emma had always been the practical one, the planner, the one who had her 5-year goals written down in neat bullet points. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said as I sat down across from her. "Emma, I need to tell you something, and it's really big." She put down her phone and looked at me with concern. "What's wrong? Is everything okay?" Grandma Rose left me her entire estate. All of it. $2.4 million. Emma's face went through a series of expressions: shock, confusion, and then something that looked almost like anger. "What do you mean, all of it? Like, everything?" "Everything. The house, her savings, investments, life insurance. She left small amounts to charity and a few personal items to other family members, but the rest, it's all mine." Emma was quiet for a long moment, stirring her latte with unnecessary intensity. "That doesn't seem fair," she finally said. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you weren't the only one who loved Grandma Rose. We all did. And you certainly weren't the only one who could use that money. Do you know how much my student loans are? Do you know how hard it's been for me and Jake to save for a house down payment?" I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't the reaction I'd expected. I thought Emma would be happy for me, maybe a little shocked, but happy. Instead, she sounded almost resentful. "Emma, I didn't ask for this. I had no idea she even had that much money." "But you must have known you were her favorite. You must have suspected something like this might happen." "No, I really didn't. I spent time with her because I loved her, not because I expected anything from her." Emma leaned back in her chair, studying my face. "So what are you going to do with it?" "I don't know yet. I'm still processing all of this." "Well, I hope you remember that family should take care of family. That money could solve a lot of problems for a lot of people." And there it was, the first crack in what I'd thought was unconditional family love. Emma wasn't congratulating me or offering support during this emotional time. She was already calculating what she thought she deserved for my inheritance. As I drove home that evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. And I was right. The news spread through my family faster than wildfire. By the end of the week, my phone was buzzing constantly with calls and texts from relatives I hadn't heard from in months, sometimes years. Suddenly, everyone wanted to catch up, everyone wanted to grab coffee, everyone had pressing financial concerns they needed to discuss. My cousin Marcus, who had ignored every family gathering for the past 3 years, left me a voicemail that was almost comically transparent. "Hey, Diana, heard the side news about Grandma Rose. Listen, I know this is tough for everyone, but I was thinking maybe we could get together and talk about how to, honor her memory in a way that helps the whole family. Call me back." My Aunt Margaret, who had given such a beautiful eulogy at the funeral, showed up at my apartment unannounced on Saturday morning. She stood in my doorway holding a coffee tray from the expensive bakery across town, wearing the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Diana, sweetheart, I thought we should have a little chat about this inheritance situation." I let her in, though every instinct I had was screaming that this was a bad idea. Margaret had always been the family organizer, the one who planned the holiday gatherings and remembered everyone's birthdays. She was also, I was beginning to realize, someone who believed she should be in control of family decisions. "I've been thinking a lot about what your grandmother would have wanted," Margaret began, settling herself on my couch with practiced ease. "And I really think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "What kind of misunderstanding?" "Well, your grandmother was elderly, Diana. Sometimes older people make decisions when they're not thinking clearly. It just doesn't make sense that she would leave everything to one person when she had so many grandchildren who loved her." I felt my jaw clench. Aunt Margaret, Grandma Rose was sharp as a tack right up until the day she died. You know that. Of course she was sharp, but money matters can be confusing, especially large amounts. And let's be honest, $2 million is a lot of responsibility for someone your age. I'm 28, not 18.
Margaret waved her hand dismissively. What I'm suggesting is that we all sit down as a family and figure out how to distribute this inheritance in a way that's fair to everyone. Your grandmother loved all her grandchildren equally, so it makes sense that the money should be shared equally. But that's not what she wanted. She left a letter explaining her decision. Letters can be influenced. Diana, I'm not saying you did anything wrong, but sometimes when we're very close to elderly relatives, we might unconsciously influence their decisions. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. She was suggesting that I had somehow manipulated my grandmother, that I had taken advantage of an old woman for financial gain. The coffee I'd been sipping suddenly tasted bitter in my mouth. I never asked Grandma Rose for anything. I spent time with her because I loved her. I'm sure you did, sweetheart, but love doesn't mean one person should inherit everything while others struggle. Your cousin Jessica just had a baby and she's drowning in medical bills. Your cousin Tom's construction business is failing because of the economy. Emma told me about her student loans. This money could change all of their lives. And there it was again, that same tone Emma had used. The assumption that I owed them something, that my inheritance was somehow their salvation. What exactly are you suggesting, Aunt Margaret? I think we should divide the inheritance equally among all the grandchildren. There are 8 of you, so that would be about $300,000 each. Still a life-changing amount for everyone, but fair. And if I refuse? Margaret's friendly facade slipped for just a moment, and I saw something cold flash in her eyes. Diana, I really hope it doesn't come to that. Families should stick together, especially during difficult times. It would be such a shame if this inheritance drove a wedge between all of us. After she left, I sat on my couch staring at the coffee cups she left behind, trying to process what had just happened. My own aunt had essentially threatened me. She'd implied that if I didn't voluntarily give up most of my inheritance, I would be ostracized from the family. But the worst was yet to come. That evening, my dad called. Dad and I always had a good relationship. He was the one who taught me how to ride a bike, who came to all my school plays, and walked me down the aisle at my college graduation when I received my degree. When his name appeared on my phone screen, I felt a wave of relief. Finally, someone who would understand, someone who would support me. Hi, Dad. Diana, we need to talk. Okay, what about? I think you know what about. This inheritance situation is tearing our family apart. My heart sunk. Even my father, the one person I'd counted on to have my back, was about to join the chorus demanding I give up my grandmother's gift. Dad, I didn't ask for this to happen. But it did happen, and now you have a choice to make. You can either do the right thing and share this money with your family, or you can be selfish and keep it all for yourself. Selfish? The word stung. Dad, Grandma Rose specifically chose to leave this money to me. She explained her reasons in a letter. Diana, your grandmother was 93 years old. She wasn't thinking about the consequences of her decision, wasn't considering how this would affect family relationships. She was completely mentally competent, and you know that. Of course she was sharp, but money matters can be confusing, especially large amounts. And let's be honest, $2 million is a lot of responsibility for someone your age. I'm 28, not 18. Look, I don't want to argue about your grandmother's mental state. The point is, this inheritance is causing problems for everyone. Your sister is crying herself to sleep every night because she feels like Grandma Rose didn't love her as much as she loved you. Your cousins are struggling financially, and here you are, sitting on more money than any of us will ever see. I could hear the manipulation in his words, the way he was trying to make me feel guilty for something that wasn't my fault. But it was working. The image of Emma crying because she felt unloved made my chest tight with guilt. What do you want me to do, Dad? I want you to be the bigger person. I want you to remember that family is more important than money. I want you to do what your grandmother would have wanted if she'd really understood the situation. And what's that? Share it. Divide it equally among all the grandchildren. Show them that you're not the kind of person who puts money ahead of family. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and cried. These were the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, who were supposed to support me through difficult times. Instead, they were all pressuring me to give up something that my grandmother had specifically wanted me to have. But the pressure was just beginning. Over the next few days, I received visits from almost every member of my extended family. My Uncle David, who I'd always thought was the fun uncle, showed up with a folder full of printouts about tax implications and investment strategies, explaining how overwhelming it would be for me to manage such a large inheritance alone. My cousin Jessica came by with her newborn baby, talking about how the medical bills were drowning her and how just $50,000 would change her life forever. Each conversation followed the same pattern. They'd start with expressions of sympathy for my loss, move into gentle suggestions about sharing the inheritance, and end with subtle threats about family consequences if I didn't comply. The worst part was how they made it sound so reasonable. They weren't asking me to give up everything, just most of it. They painted themselves as the voice of fairness and family values, while positioning me as the greedy villain who was hoarding money that could help everyone. But then something happened that changed everything. I was having lunch with my friend Sarah, someone I'd known since college who had no stake in my family drama. I'd been telling her about the pressure. I gave me a look that was part concern and part frustration. Diana, can I ask you something? Of course. Why do you think your grandmother left you this money? I don't know. Because she loved me. And she didn't love the others? No, that's not what I meant. I think she loved all of us, but she and I had a special relationship. Okay, so she made a deliberate choice to leave her money to the person she felt closest to, the person she trusted most. She was completely mentally competent when she made this decision. Yes. Then why are you even considering giving it away? Because my family is furious with me. They think I'm being selfish. She leaned forward, her expression serious. Diana, let me tell you something. I've watched you give up things for other people your entire adult life. You gave up that promotion because Emma was going through a divorce and needed emotional support. You loaned your cousin Mark $5,000 for his business venture that never got paid back. You spent every weekend for 2 years taking care of your grandmother when everyone else was too busy. That's different. That's just what you do for family. Exactly. That's what you do for family. But what do they do for you? I sat there stunned by the question. When was the last time someone in my family had made a sacrifice for me? When was the last time they'd put my needs ahead of their own convenience? This is what your grandmother saw. She saw how much you gave and how little you asked for in return. She saw that you were the one person who loved her without expecting anything back.
That's why she left you this money, Diana. It wasn't an accident or a mistake or a moment of confusion. It was a deliberate choice made by a woman who understood her family better than they understood themselves. That night, I reread my grandmother's letter. This time, I paid attention to different parts of it. You were the only one who saw me as more than just an old woman with stories to tell. You loved me without expecting anything in return. I trust you to understand what it truly represents. For the first time since I'd inherited the money, I began to see the situation clearly. My grandmother hadn't just left me money, she'd left me a test. And the way my family was reacting to this inheritance was revealing truths about their character that I'd been too naive to see before. But just when I thought I understood the situation, my family decided to escalate their pressure campaign in ways I never could have imagined. The family meeting was Emma's idea, though I suspected she'd been coached by Aunt Margaret. She called me on a Thursday evening, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. Diana, we need to settle this inheritance situation once and for all. It's destroying our family, and I can't take it anymore. What are you suggesting? A family meeting this Sunday at Mom and Dad's house. Everyone will be there, all the grandchildren, all the aunts and uncles. We're going to discuss this like adults and come to a fair resolution. Every instinct I had screamed that this was a trap, but I also knew that avoiding the conversation would only make things worse. Fine, but I want you to understand that I haven't made any decisions yet about what to do with the money. That's all we're asking for, Diana. Just keep an open mind. Sunday arrived gray and drizzly, which seemed fitting for what I knew was going to be an unpleasant afternoon. I drove to my parents' house with my grandmother's letter in my purse and a growing sense of dread in my stomach. The living room was packed when I arrived. All 8 grandchildren were there, plus most of the aunts and uncles. Someone had arranged the furniture so that there was a single chair facing the rest of the group, like I was about to be put on trial. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. My father gestured to the isolated chair. Diana, why don't you sit there so everyone can see you? As I took my seat, I looked around at the faces of my family members. Some looked sympathetic, others seemed angry, but all of them were focused on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Uncle David cleared his throat and stood up, apparently having appointed himself as the spokesperson for the group. Diana, we're all here because we love you, and we're concerned about you. This inheritance has put you in a very difficult position, and we want to help you figure out the best way to handle it. I appreciate the concern. Now, we've all been thinking about the situation, and we believe we've come up with a solution that would be fair to everyone while still honoring your grandmother's wishes. He pulled out a sheet of paper covered with numbers and calculations. We think the fairest thing would be to divide the inheritance among all 8 grandchildren, but with you receiving a larger share since you were specifically named in the will. So instead of everyone getting equal amounts, you would get $500,000 and the other 7 would each get about $270,000. I stared at him. They had actually sat down and calculated how to divide my inheritance without me. They had assigned monetary values to family relationships and decided what they thought I deserved. That still seems generous to Diana. I mean, she's single, with no kids, no mortgage. She doesn't need as much as those of us with families. That's true, agreed Jessica. Diana, you have to admit that you're in a better financial position than most of us. This money would be life-changing for people with real responsibilities. Real responsibilities. As if my life, my struggles, my dreams didn't matter because I hadn't followed the same path they had. My sister Emma leaned forward, her eyes pleading. Diana, please, this is tearing our family apart. Grandma Rose would be heartbroken to see us fighting like this. She wouldn't have wanted her money to cause this kind of division. How do you know what Grandma Rose would have wanted? I asked quietly. Because we all knew her, Aunt Margaret snapped. She loved all her grandchildren equally. She would never have wanted one person to have everything while others struggled. Then how did she structure her will the way she did? The room fell silent for a moment. Then my father spoke up. Diana, your grandmother was old, and maybe a little sentimental about your Sunday visits, but she couldn't have predicted how this decision would affect the whole family. She wouldn't have wanted to cause this kind of pain. I pulled my grandmother's letter from my purse and read it aloud, every word of it, including the parts about how she trusted me to understand what the money truly represented and how I was the only one who loved her without expecting anything in return. When I finished reading, the room was quiet for a long moment. Then my cousin Marcus actually laughed. Come on, Diana. That sounds like something you could have written yourself. A convenient letter that justifies you keeping all the money? Really?
The accusation hit me like a physical blow. He was suggesting that I had forged my grandmother's final letter to me, that I had fabricated her last words to justify my greed. "How dare you?" I whispered. "I'm just saying it's awfully convenient. The one piece of evidence that supports your claim just happens to paint you as the perfect, selfless granddaughter who deserves everything." That letter was witnessed by Mr. Henderson, her lawyer. Lawyers can be fooled too, especially by young women who know how to manipulate elderly relatives. And there it was again, the suggestion that I had somehow taken advantage of my grandmother. But this time, the accusation was being made in front of the entire family, and no one was defending me. In fact, I could see several people nodding along, as if they thought this theory made perfect sense. I looked around the room at these people I'd loved my entire life, searching for one sympathetic face, one person who would stand up for me. My eyes landed on Emma, my sister, my closest family member. Surely she would defend me against these horrible accusations. Instead, Emma looked away, unable to meet my gaze. That's when I realized what was really happening. This wasn't a family meeting to discuss the inheritance. This was an intervention designed to break me down, to make me feel so guilty and isolated that I would give them what they wanted just to stop the emotional abuse. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking with rage and hurt. "You want to know what Grandma Rose would think about this?" I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. "I think she would be heartbroken to see how quickly you all turned on me the moment money was involved. I think she would be disgusted by the way you've accused me of manipulating her and forging her letters. I think she would be ashamed to see her own children and grandchildren ganging up on someone she loved." "Diana, please sit down. We're not attacking you. We're trying to help you see reason." "No, Dad. You're trying to bully me into giving up something that Grandma Rose specifically wanted me to have. You're trying to make me feel guilty for honoring her wishes instead of caving to your demands." I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, but Aunt Margaret stood up and blocked my path. "Diana, if you walk out that door, you're choosing money over family. Is that really the kind of person you want to be?" I looked her in the eye. This woman who had helped raise me, who had been a second mother to me after my own mother died, and I saw a stranger. Someone who was willing to emotionally manipulate and threaten me to get what she wanted. The kind of person I want to be is the kind of person Grandma Rose raised me to be. Someone with integrity, someone who honors commitments, someone who doesn't betray the people she loves for money. I pushed past her and walked out, leaving behind a room full of people who had just shown me their true colors. But as I drove home, my hand shaking on the steering wheel, I realized that this confrontation had actually clarified everything for me. I finally understood what my grandmother's letter really meant. She hadn't just left me money. She had left me a test of character, both mine and theirs. And now I knew exactly what I was going to do with her gift.
The attacks began almost immediately after I walked out of that family meeting. Not physical attacks, but something almost worse. A coordinated campaign designed to destroy my reputation and isolate me from everyone I cared about. It started with social media. My cousin Jessica posted a long, emotional Facebook status about how grief makes people do terrible things and how sometimes the people you trust most will disappoint you. She never mentioned my name, but everyone who knew our family understood exactly what she was talking about. The comments section filled up with friends and extended family members expressing sympathy and support for her, while I was painted as the unnamed villain in her story. My cousin Tom went even further. He posted old photos of family gatherings with captions like, "Remember when family meant something?" and "Some people value money more than relationships." Again, no names, but the message was clear. Emma unfriended me on all social media platforms. When I tried to call her, she wouldn't answer. When I went to her apartment, she wouldn't come to the door, though I could see her car in the parking lot. The whisper campaign was even worse. I started hearing through mutual friends that my family was spreading stories about how I had isolated my grandmother from the rest of them, how I had manipulated her in her final years, how I had somehow convinced her to change her will. The stories grew more elaborate with each telling until I was being portrayed as some kind of master manipulator who had preyed on a vulnerable elderly woman. My father stopped calling. My Aunt Margaret blocked my phone number. Even family friends who had known me since childhood started treating me differently, looking at me with suspicion and disappointment whenever I ran into them around town. But the final straw came when I received a letter from a law firm I'd never heard of. The letter informed me that several family members were contesting my grandmother's will. They were claiming that Rose Henderson had been mentally incompetent when she wrote it, that she had been unduly influenced by me, and that the will should be invalidated. They were demanding access to her medical records, her financial records, and copies of all communications between us in the months before her death. I stared at the legal document, feeling sick to my stomach. My own family was taking me to court. They were so determined to get their hands on the inheritance that they were willing to drag my grandmother's memory through the mud, to publicly claim she was senile and easily manipulated. That evening, I called Mr. Henderson. I needed legal advice, but more than that, I needed to talk to someone who had actually known my grandmother, who could confirm that I wasn't going crazy, that the woman I remembered was real. "Diana," he said when he heard my voice, "I was wondering when you'd call. I heard about the will contest." "Mr. Henderson, they're saying she was mentally incompetent. They're saying I manipulated her. You knew her, you saw her in those final months. Was there any sign that she was confused or not thinking clearly?" "Diana, your grandmother was one of the sharpest people I've ever known, right up until the end. She came to my office 6 months before she died to update her will, and she was absolutely clear about what she wanted and why. She anticipated that there might be family conflict over her decision, and she was prepared for it." "What do you mean?" "She left me some additional instructions, sealed letters that I was only supposed to open if the will was contested. Diana, I think you need to come to my office tomorrow. There are things about your grandmother she wanted you to know, things she didn't put in her regular letter because she hoped she wouldn't need to." The next morning, I sat in the same chair where I'd first learned about my inheritance, watching Mr. Henderson open a sealed envelope with my name on it. His expression was somber as he read the contents. "Diana, before I share this with you, I want you to understand that your grandmother was struggling with this decision. She loved her whole family, but she was also deeply disappointed by some of their behavior over the years." He handed me a second letter in my grandmother's handwriting, this one much longer than the first. "My dearest Diana, if you're reading this, then my family has chosen to challenge my will, which means they have forced me to share some painful truths that I had hoped to take to my grave. I need you to understand that my decision to leave you my estate was not made lightly or impulsively. It was the result of years of observation, years of watching different family members treat me and each other, years of seeing who was genuine in their love and who was simply going through the motions. You were not the only grandchild who visited me, but you were the only one who visited me when you had nothing to gain from it. Emma came by when she needed money or advice about her career. Marcus showed up when his girlfriend dumped him and he needed a place to stay. Jessica visited when she wanted me to babysit or when she needed help with bills. But you came every Sunday just to sit with me. You came when you were stressed about work, when you were happy about some small victory, when you had nothing particular to talk about but just wanted company. You were the only one who saw me as a person rather than as a resource. I know they will say I was too old to make good decisions, that you somehow influenced me. Diana, I want you to know that I have been planning this inheritance for over 10 years.
I have been watching and evaluating, and I have been disappointed over and over again by the behavior of people I raised and loved. Your father borrowed $15,000 from me 3 years ago to pay off his credit cards. He promised to pay me back within 6 months. He never did, and when I gently mentioned it, he became angry and accused me of being obsessed with money. Your Aunt Margaret asked me to co-sign a loan for her son's car, then never made a single payment. When the bank came after me for the money, she said it wasn't her fault that Marcus was irresponsible. Emma came to me crying about her student loans, so I offered to help with the payments. Then I discovered she was using that money to go on vacation trips with her friends while her loans continued to accumulate interest. When I confronted her, she said I was being controlling and that I didn't understand how hard it was to be young in today's economy. These are just a few examples, Diana. Over the years, I have watched my children and grandchildren take from me financially while never once offering to help with anything I needed. When I fell and hurt my hip last winter, who came to help me? You did. When I needed someone to drive me to doctor's appointments, who volunteered? You did. When I wanted to plant my rose garden but couldn't manage the physical work anymore, who spent entire weekends helping me? You did. But here's what really broke my heart. Last year, I was having chest pains and thought I might be having a heart attack. I called my father first, but he was at a work conference and said he couldn't leave. I called Emma, but she was on a date and didn't want to interrupt it. I called Margaret, but she said she was too tired to drive across town. Do you know who I called next? You. And do you know what you did? You dropped everything, picked me up, and sat with me in the emergency room for 6 hours until the doctors confirmed it was just acid reflux. You never once complained about the time. You never once made me feel like a burden. You brought me magazines to read and bought me coffee from the terrible hospital vending machine, and you made jokes to keep my spirits up. That night, I went home and called my lawyer. I told him I wanted to change my will, and I wanted to make sure it was legally bulletproof because I knew my family would challenge it. Diana, this money represents 60 years of sacrifice, 60 years of putting family first, 60 years of helping people who never helped me back. I am leaving it to you because you are the only person in this family who understands what real love looks like. It's not flashy or dramatic or convenient. It's showing up. It's being present. It's caring about someone when there's nothing in it for you. Use this money wisely. Use it to build a life that would make me proud. And don't let anyone make you feel guilty for honoring the wishes of someone who loved you enough to trust you with her life's work. All my love always. Grandma Rose. P.S. I have documented every financial interaction I've had with family members over the past 5 years. Mr. Henderson has copies of all the records, including the loans that were never repaid, the promises that were never kept, and even the time she needed help and was ignored. If anyone tries to paint me as a confused old woman, he has permission to share these documents with the court. I finished reading the letter with tears streaming down my face. Mr. Henderson quietly handed me another tissue and waited for me to compose myself. Diana, your grandmother was very thorough in her preparations. She anticipated every argument your family might make, and she documented everything: the loans, the broken promises, even the times she needed help and was ignored. She never wanted to use this information, but she wanted to protect you if it became necessary. She knew they would do this? She hoped they wouldn't, but yes, she knew it was possible. She told me once that money has a way of revealing people's true character, and she was afraid of what this inheritance might reveal about her family. So what happens now? Now we respond to their legal challenge with your grandmother's documentation. Diana, I have to tell you, this case will not go well for them. Your grandmother's will is ironclad, her mental competency is well documented, and their claims of undue influence are completely unsupported by evidence. But more than that, if they force us to present her records in court, it's going to be very embarrassing for them.
What do you mean? I mean that all of their financial dealings with your grandmother will become part of the public record. The unpaid loans, the broken promises, the times they ignored her when she needed help. Diana, if they continue with this lawsuit, they're going to destroy their own reputations. That night, I sat in my apartment thinking about everything I'd learned. My grandmother hadn't just been testing my character with this inheritance, she'd been testing everyone's character, and they were all failing spectacularly. But I still had one more decision to make. I could fight this legal battle and win, keeping the money and watching my family destroy themselves in court. Or I could find another way, a way that would honor my grandmother's memory while teaching my family the lesson they desperately needed to learn. That's when I came up with my plan. It was risky, it was dramatic, and it would probably shock everyone involved. But it was also, I thought, exactly what my grandmother would have done if she'd been in my position. The next morning, I called my lawyer and told him I wanted to call a press conference. The press conference was held in the conference room of Mr. Henderson's law firm on a Wednesday afternoon. I'd sent invitations to every major news outlet in our mid-sized city, though I wasn't sure anyone would actually show up. The story of a family inheritance dispute wasn't exactly front-page news. But I was wrong. The room was packed with reporters, photographers, and camera crews. Apparently, the human interest angle of a family torn apart by money was more compelling than I'd realized. I sat at the head of the conference table, my grandmother's letters spread out in front of me, my hands shaking slightly as I prepared to reveal everything. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "My name is Diana Martinez, and 3 months ago, I inherited my grandmother's estate worth $2.4 million. Today, I want to tell you what that inheritance has taught me about family, love, and the true cost of money." I told them everything. The pressure campaign, the family meeting where I was essentially put on trial, the accusations that I had manipulated an elderly woman, the will contest that was currently making its way through the courts. I read portions of both of my grandmother's letters, including the detailed documentation of her family's financial betrayals. My grandmother left me this money because she wanted to teach me something about love. She wanted me to understand the difference between people who love you for who you are and people who love you for what you can give them. This inheritance has been the most painful education of my life, but it's also been the most valuable. I paused, looking directly into the cameras. Today, I'm announcing what I'm going to do with my grandmother's money. I'm not going to keep it, and I'm not going to divide it among my family members who have spent the past 3 months trying to bully and manipulate me into giving it to them. The room was completely silent. I could see reporters leaning forward, waiting for the revelation. Instead, I'm donating the entire inheritance to establish the Rose Martinez Foundation for Elderly Care. This foundation will provide support services for elderly individuals who have been abandoned or neglected by their families. It will fund visiting programs, medical assistance, legal advocacy, and emergency housing for seniors who have nowhere else to turn. I heard several gasps from the audience, but I continued. My grandmother spent her final years watching her children and grandchildren take from her while giving very little in return. She saw how many elderly people in our community were facing the same situation. This foundation will be her legacy, a way to ensure that other elderly individuals don't have to choose between financial security and family love. But more than that, I added, this foundation will serve as a reminder that real love isn't about what someone can give you. It's about what you're willing to give them, especially when they have nothing left to offer. The questions from reporters came fast and furious. They wanted to know about the family's reaction, about the legal challenge, about whether I regretted my decision. I answered honestly.
explaining that I hadn't made this choice to punish my family, but to honor my grandmother's values and to create something positive from a painful situation. "Do you think your family will understand your decision?" one reporter asked. I paused, thinking about the question. I hope they will, eventually. I hope they'll see that this isn't about choosing strangers over family. It's about choosing to do what's right over what's easy. The news story went viral within hours. Local TV stations picked it up first, then regional outlets, then national outlets. Suddenly, my family's inheritance dispute was being discussed on social media, in online forums, and even on morning talk shows. The reactions were intense and divided. Some people praised me for taking a principled stand and creating something meaningful from a family tragedy. Others criticized me for airing family business in public and for being vindictive toward people who were just trying to survive in a difficult economy. But the reaction that mattered most came from my family themselves. My phone started ringing within minutes of the news breaking. Emma was the first to call, her voice shaking with rage. "Diana, how could you do this? How could you humiliate us like this on television?" "Emma, I didn't say anything that wasn't true. You made us look like monsters. You made it sound like we were trying to steal from you. Weren't you?" There was a long silence on the line. "This is unforgivable. You've destroyed our family for a publicity stunt." My dad called next, his voice cold and controlled. "Diana, I don't know who you've become, but you're not the daughter I raised. The person I raised was someone who honored commitments and stood up for what was right. That's exactly what I'm doing. What you're doing is selfish and cruel. You've taken money that could have helped your own flesh and blood and given it to strangers. I've taken money that Grandma Rose wanted me to have and used it the way she would have wanted me to use it." One by one, family members called to express their outrage, their disappointment, their complete rejection of me and my decision. Some were angry, some were hurt, some were coldly furious. But none of them, not a single one, asked about my grandmother's letters or acknowledged the pain their behavior had caused me. The legal challenge was dropped within a week. My family's lawyers advised them that proceeding with the case would only bring more negative publicity and that they had no real chance of winning anyway. But the personal damage was done. I was effectively excommunicated from my family. No one called to check on me, no one invited me to gatherings, no one acknowledged my existence. It was as if I had never been born, never been part of their lives. For a while, I wondered if I had made the right choice. The loneliness was overwhelming, and there were nights when I questioned whether honoring my grandmother's wishes had been worth losing everyone else I loved. But then the letters started arriving. Elderly people from across the country wrote to thank me for creating the foundation. Adult children who had watched their parents struggle with abandonment and neglect reached out to share their stories. Healthcare workers, social workers, and legal advocates offered to volunteer their services. Within 6 months, the Rose Martinez Foundation had helped over 300 elderly individuals. We'd provided emergency housing for seniors who had been evicted by family members, legal advocacy for those being financially exploited, and companionship programs for people who had been isolated and forgotten. But the letter that meant the most came from an unexpected source. It was from Mrs. Chen, an 84-year-old woman who lived in the same neighborhood where my grandmother had spent her final years. "Dear Diana, I knew your grandmother Rose for over 20 years. We were neighbors, and sometimes we would sit on our front porches in the evenings and talk about our families, our regrets, our hopes for the future. Rose talked about you often, especially in those last few months. She was so proud of the woman you had become, so grateful for the love and care you showed her. But she was also worried about you, worried that your kindness would be taken advantage of by people who didn't appreciate it. She told me once that she was leaving you her money, and she explained why. She said you were the only person in her family who understood that love was something you gave freely, not something you used to get what you wanted. I want you to know that your grandmother would be so proud of what you've done with her gift. She always said that the best way to honor someone's memory was to live the values they taught you. You've done that and more. I also want you to know that real family isn't always the people you're born to. Sometimes real family is the people who choose to love and support you when you need it most. You have that family now, in all the people's lives you've touched through the foundation. Your grandmother's legacy lives on through you and through the love you're spreading to people who need it most. With gratitude and respect, Helen Chen. As I finished reading Mrs. Chen's letter, I realized that my grandmother's final gift hadn't just been money. It had been the opportunity to discover who I really was when everything else was stripped away. It had been the chance to learn that integrity, compassion, and staying true to your values were worth more than any amount of money or family approval. 6 months later, I received one more unexpected communication. It was a text from Emma, the first contact I'd had from any family member since the press conference. I saw the news story about the foundation helping that elderly veteran find housing. I wanted you to know that I think what you're doing is important. I'm not ready to talk yet, but I wanted you to know that I see it. It wasn't an apology, and it wasn't a reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement, and for now, that was enough.
It's been a year now since I inherited my grandmother's fortune, and I'm writing this story because I want people to understand what I learned from the most difficult period of my life. I learned that money doesn't change people, it reveals them. The same family members who pressured me to share the inheritance had been taking advantage of my grandmother's generosity for years. The inheritance didn't make them greedy, it just made their greed impossible to ignore. I learned that real love doesn't come with conditions or expectations. The people who truly loved my grandmother didn't love her for what she could give them, they loved her for who she was. And that's the kind of love worth fighting for, worth protecting, worth honoring. I learned that sometimes doing the right thing means standing alone. There were moments when I questioned my decision, when the loneliness felt overwhelming, when I wondered if maintaining my principles was worth losing my family. But every elderly person we've helped through the foundation, every life we've touched, every moment of dignity we've restored has confirmed that I made the right choice. Most importantly, I learned that legacy isn't about what you leave behind, it's about what you inspire others to carry forward. My grandmother's true legacy isn't the money she saved or the will she wrote, it's the values she instilled in me, the example she set, and the ripple effect of kindness that continues to spread through the work of the foundation. The Rose Martinez Foundation has now helped over 1,000 elderly individuals. We've reunited seniors with estranged family members, prevented countless cases of financial abuse, and created a network of support for people who thought they had been forgotten by the world. But beyond the numbers, we've reminded people that growing old doesn't mean becoming invisible, that needing help doesn't diminish your worth, and that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect regardless of what they can offer in return. As for my family, we're still estranged for most of them. Emma and I have started exchanging occasional texts, careful conversations that might someday rebuild into something resembling a relationship. My father and I haven't spoken since that phone call after the press conference. Some wounds, I'm learning, take longer to heal than others. But I've also discovered that true family isn't just about blood relations. The volunteers at the foundation, the elderly clients who've become friends, the community members who've embraced our mission, these people have become my chosen family. They've shown me that love based on shared values and mutual respect is often stronger than love based on shared genetics. I still miss my grandmother every day. I miss our Sunday morning conversations, her terrible coffee, and the way she could make me feel like the most important person in the world just by listening to my problems. But I also feel her presence in the work I'm doing, in the lives we're changing, and the legacy of compassion that continues to grow. So let me ask you something. When you think about the people you love, do you love them for who they are or for what they can give you? When you think about your own legacy, what do you want to be remembered for? And if you were faced with a choice between doing what's popular and doing what's right, which would you choose? These are the questions my grandmother's inheritance forced me to answer, and they're questions I think everyone should consider before it's too late to make different choices. If this story has touched you, if it's made you think differently about love, family, or legacy, I encourage you to find your own way to make a difference. Visit an elderly neighbor who might be lonely, volunteer at a local senior center, call a grandparent or elderly relative just to let them know you're thinking about them. And remember that the most valuable inheritance you can leave someone isn't money, it's the knowledge that they are deeply, truly loved for exactly who they are. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it inspires you to think about your own relationships, your own values, and your own legacy. Because in the end, we're all going to be remembered not for what we accumulated, but for how we loved and how we chose to use whatever gifts we were given. The Rose Martinez Foundation continues to grow and serve elderly individuals who need support, advocacy, and most importantly, someone who sees their inherent worth. It's not the legacy my grandmother planned, but I believe it's the legacy she would have chosen. And that, I think, is the greatest inheritance of all. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have shared the money with your family, or would you have made a different choice entirely? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing for more real-life stories about family, love, and the choices that define us. And remember, the greatest legacy you can leave someone isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the lives you touch and the love you share. Until next time, choose kindness, choose integrity, and choose to see the inherent worth in every person you meet.